Uh, let's continue our lecture with the GraphQL API vulnerabilities. GraphQL vulnerabilities generally arise due to the implementation and the design flaws. For example, the introspection feature may be left active, enabling attackers to query the AP in order to glean information about its scheme. GraphQL attacks usually take the form of malicious requests that can enable an attacker to obtain data or perform unauthorized actions. These attacks can have a severe impact, especially if the user is able to gain admin privileges by manipulating queries or executing a SSRF exploit. Vulnerable GraphQL APIs can also lead to information disclosure issues. In this section, we'll look at how to test GraphQL APIs. Don't worry if you are not familiar with GraphQL. We'll cover the relevant details as we go. We've also provided some labs so you can practice what you've learned. For finding GraphQL endpoints, before you can test a GraphQL API, you first need to find its endpoint. As GraphQL APIs use the same endpoint for all requests, this is a valuable piece of information. Universal queries. If you send query with the type name to any GraphQL endpoint, it will include the string data type name query. Somewhere in its response, this is known as a universal query and is a useful tool in probing whether a URL corresponds to a GraphQL service. The query works because every GraphQL endpoint has a reserved field called type name that returns the queried object's type as a string. Here the common endpoint names. GraphQL services often use similar endpoint suffixes. When testing for GraphQL endpoints, you should look to send universal queries to the following locations, like GraphQL API, API GraphQL, or this, like this. If these common endpoints don't return a GraphQL response, you could also try this one to the pass. It's worth to note that GraphQL services will often respond to any non-GraphQL requests with a query not present or similar error. You should bear this in mind when testing for GraphQL endpoints. Request methods. The next step is in trying to find GraphQL endpoints is to test using different request methods. It's best practice for production GraphQL endpoints to only accept post requests that have a content type of application, JSON, as this helps to protect against CSRF vulnerabilities. However, some endpoints may accept alternative methods such as GET requests or POST requests that use the content type of form URL encoded. If you can find the GraphQL endpoint by sending POST requests to common endpoints, try resending the universal query using alternative HTTP methods. Initial testing. Once you have discovered the endpoint, you can send some test requests to understand a little more about how it works. If the endpoint is powering a website, try exploring the web interface in web browser and use HTTP history to examine the queries that are sent. For example, here. For example, the query below requests a product list for an online shop. Like example, project query, query products ID name listed, yes. And then Here the example product response, and the product list returns contains only list of products, like product 1 listed true, product 2 listed true, ID 2, like this. Yes. From this information we can infer the following: products are assigned a sequential ID. Product ID 3 is missing from the list, possibly because it has been delisted. By querying the ID of the missing product, we can get its details, even so it's not listed on the shop here. It was returned. It was not returned by the original products query. Here, missing product response. As you can see here, a product, it's ID 3, product 3, but it's not listed. You can see, no, that's why we cannot see that in the first hour request.